Good evening and welcome to TalkSports, our weekly program where we speak to the movers and shakers of sports, well, in sports as well. The sportsmen, the sportswomen, administrators, whoever it is involved in sports, we do get to chat with them. Well, on this week's program of TalkSports, we'll be discussing with the co-author of a new book, The ABCs of Caribbean Sport, Marketing and Psychology. We'll hear all about that. Well, Carole Beckford of Jamaica is joining us this evening, and she's no stranger to the media, and you'll hear why. Because herself, and I hope I wouldn't be chastised for saying a veteran. I know some people don't like to hear the word veteran, but a veteran, I should say, in the profession, and a veteran in the context of being involved in the media for so many years and the contribution that she would have made there. But heavily involved, I would say, in and entrenched in other areas of the media, whether it's public relations, marketing, entertainment, sports tourism, communication, as a communication specialist, as a trainer, and the list goes on. We'll hear all about that when Carole comes on, but she has held many positions, including marketing and communications manager at Cricket West Indies, and she was also the a Jampro film commissioner that's in Jamaica. So again, we'll hear all about that, and co-founder of the Business of Sport Conference. So many, I am certain I'm leaving out some, but let me welcome Carole to our program this evening. Carole, good evening to you. I know you're coming live from Kingston, Jamaica. Good evening to you, Carole.
And hello to your listeners and viewers.
Right. Thank you very much. And again, as we said, we have quite a lot to discuss. Of course, we'll center on this new book, The ABCs of Caribbean Sport, Marketing and Psychology. As I indicated to you, my copy is on its way, so I should be having my own within the next week or so. But first of all, let me get Carole's book, right? That's The ABCs of Caribbean Sport. Marketing and Psychology. Right, Carole. So tell us something about, let's start off why the need for such a book at this time?
Well, the truth is, again, thanks, Michael, for having me. The Caribbean, for the last 60 years or so, they're athletes, whether in track and field, basketball, football, cricket, as you know. Well, cricket so much longer, back in the 1920s, have been on the world stage for such a long time. And I think some of the sports and some of the administrators and even some of the people who work to support the business have not been able to capitalize on a number of things. And I think for too many years, we have relied too much on talent. And with all the money that is involved in sport now, I think that there are just some things that we can do to capitalize better. And to fast forward to this book, marketing and psychology are two of the main areas. Psychology, first, because it is about competition. It is about really how to, be fierce with your competitors or against your competitors. How to, well, as the word says, psych up yourself so that you're able to compete at the highest level consistently. But marketing too, to be able to be associated with brands, to look after you've come off the field or track or court. And so I think in terms of timeliness, the reason why we did this book was because we hosted the Women's World T20 in Antigua, Guyana, and St. Lucia back in 2018, and myself and Dr. Rose figured, while we're using that as a stepping stone, we could incorporate some things. And we went ABCs because we thought it would have been the best way to kind of give people a synopsis of what it is or some of the areas of focus.
So quite a bit, and of course the you will probably detail as to not just why it's necessary, and especially how we can embrace the opportunities that are afforded us at this time, especially with the pandemic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. As you would have known, I the Olympics, which was held in Japan, was put off, and it was just recently. Track and field got a real boost. I think some of the other Caribbean islands would have participated in some other sports, judo, boxing, and so on. But the fact that a major event could have still been hosted in the pandemic, and with all the eyes focused, because so many jurisdictions were under lockdown, so people were restricted on their movement. So people really had you almost had nothing else to do except watch sports. I mean, like this month in particular, October, the USA calls it the equinox, which is when all of their major sporting events are happening. So like tonight in
Yeah,
particular, the NBA, the NFL,
college,
NHL,
they have college football.
college,
Yeah.
right? And the WNBA would have just finished. And I think that when we're so close to the USA, and they're the marketing capital of the world, it is almost expected that it is time enough, since we are matching them with talent, but we haven't been able to match them with some competitive advantage and or ability to be associated with brands at their level.
Mhm. And why the tag marketing and psychology?
Because those are the two key areas that have money and competition, which is what sport is all about. You're in it to earn a living, and the other one is to leverage your brand to be able to earn after. Because certainly the associations now that you make while you're competing, it will be leveraged into retirement. And I think that so many of us, look at some of our, let's use cricket for example, because cricket has been around probably the longest in the region. A lot of what happens in the business of cricket is that some of the better cricketers end up being coaches. A few of them have gone into commentary and have made significant amount of money um, in broadcast. Let's call it broadcast. But what about the others who have not chosen either areas? I know some are doing things like the academies, and they're developing the next generation. But what else is there to do? And so when you're associated with a gear sponsor or a shoe sponsor, a beverage, a car, you can almost create opportunities while you're playing for afterlife. So you get a salary and those endorsements. But there are certain things that you're gonna have to do to ensure that those relationships continue. And some of the tips that we've given in the book from A to Z includes that. And we have used examples of people who have been successful. So that is really it. The psychological part of it really speaks to the edge you have as a competitor, how you maintain consistent performances and over periods, and even know when to stop, when to take a break, when to quit, and so on. So there are some, things in there about attitude and how bold you are and so on. And I mean, even while we're exposed to these things from a marketing standpoint, you kind of have to have a basic understanding of what happens in the mind of the athlete. And I use athlete generally to describe who those people are, whether you're a cricketer, footballer, basketballer, or so on, to be able to compete globally. Because nowadays it doesn't matter, globalization just broke down all the barriers. So it doesn't matter where you're from, you just have to be consistent. And you could end up with a 16-year-old from Australia or from Sri Lanka that would have developed enough from the talent side, but because they have played so much more games than the standard person in the Caribbean, when they meet at the global level, what is it that takes us over the edge, even with top class talent, to be able to defeat that athlete that has more games under their belt?
Mhm. But so, in all that you're saying there now, and I mean, your experience is not just within the corners of Jamaica. You have Caribbean and international experience. But do you think the Caribbean landscape as it is now is in a position or ready to embrace the sort of changes that you are speaking about?
Well, talent-wise, for sure, yes. Some marketing, there are some examples that we can follow, but there's some what I'd call diplomatic things that need to happen, that I think needs to take place, that we need to formulate. Need to have a better understanding of logistics and how brands operate. Something as simple as we're still living on island time, for example. And our appreciation of businesses cannot be just the basic. So while our athletes have to show up at an event on time and all that kind of things, the people who manage us, we need to have more of our type of people from our environment that manages our athletes. And the only way we can do that is if we get more involved, be part of the growth development, because the environment has a lot to do with it. How many times over the years we have had managers from out of our jurisdiction that culturally don't understand how the Caribbean operates. And so it is important that we have a comprehensive study and work of what sport should be as a business in the region to be able to capitalize. Instead of always having to depend on people from external jurisdictions to support what we do. Wealth creation is an important part of the business of sport. And the people who support, not just technically, because we have great coaches in the region across the board in a number of sports, but we just need more business people, more business-minded people that can bring greater economic value to what our industry looks like.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying that in the context too that we are seeing more and more of our sportsmen and sportswomen, and even to some extent our administrators, are moving from just the amateurs to the professional settings. So it's critical that they understand the whole business of sport. And it's something you have been advocating for many years, which also led to your, as part of the co-founding the Business of Sport conference, in Jamaica.
Right. It's not difficult. It's something that we, as I said, we're near shore in terms of the United States, and they're still the marketing capital of the world. Somehow they've been able to almost manufacture a brand out of the basics, and that's something that we can learn about. What it is, they have a model that they've used. So there are certain basic things, content for one. You must always have availability of content, which means things like broadcast rights and so on for all our competitions have to be secured, because we want as many people to view and watch as possible. And those things are key. So while the individual athletes may be able to garner their own support because they're, for example, using social media, as organizations that govern sport in the region, whether at the national levels in the various Caribbean countries, but also regionally, there must be some effort being made. And the only way we can do that is if we almost have a watchdog group that seeks out those things, but we must have consensus. And there's an organization that I tend to pick at them because I don't think they've done enough. They've been hot and cold. Caricom. Caricom has not been able to, through policy or advocacy, connect us in the real way. So the countries that are always exploiting their best, i.e. Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda in some sports, it is still too, what I'd call choppy, or I don't want to use the word divided because that really doesn't describe, but each island is doing, or each country is doing their own thing. And collectively, we can do better to capitalize on a global market. There are just about 6.1 million in the English-speaking Caribbean. And when we represent, whether it's through World Cup football, Olympics, we have a number of representatives in the NBA, in the NFL. We ought to be doing better in terms of how we market our athletes. I mean, I read earlier where Curtly Ambrose's 19-year-old daughter has been named as one of the top 10 breakout models as listed by Vogue. Now that's important. But there is another supermodel somewhere else in one of those islands in the Eastern Caribbean who is doing the scouting, who is looking at those. And it's not just sport, it's entertainment and that general thing that we have to capitalize on. And I find that we're still using traditional methods while we still want the results, but we're not willing to be creative and innovative.
Mm. Interesting indeed. We'll come back at some of those things, but I always want to find out, and probably you can share with us, how someone like Carole actually got involved in marketing and communications. What your breeding ground, how you got involved?
Family, I mean, my family is pretty much what I call an outdoor type. Dating myself from as far back as 1975, 76, I was going to cricket at Sabina Park. We were watching the National Football Leagues, driving from St. Anne to Kingston to watch national football. So, you kind of adopted that. And then I actually played. I played netball. I played some volleyball. Actually, was on a volleyball scholarship in New York. That's how I got my training.
That's at Mercy College?
Yes.
Yeah.
So did a bit of that. And then you kind of never wanted to do what everybody else was doing. So while at the very beginning, you probably figured you wanted to be a doctor. That's probably the first reference. But then after you realize that there are other things to life. And so you play, you become an administrator, and then you realize that somebody is not really doing the marketing. How did I get in marketing? Oh, when I was doing A levels and in lower six, my mother said, 3 A levels is not enough to do. So find something and do in lower six. I picked up econ and accounts. And in econ, you learned about demand and supply. The next thing I know, I was sitting on a marketing committee. Glenn Mills was the coach, track and field coach at that community college at the time. And in my first book, I wrote about that, his influence, and he took me around to track meets and so on. So you just really kind of got involved and you realize you kind of fill the gaps. And so, yeah, that was how. So, of course, as you mentioned in the introduction, I would have done journalism. So I worked at the newspaper, did some radio, did a little bit of television, which I don't like because I don't like being on screen. But yeah, so you kind of worked around it and you found the gaps that were important. And then as you got older, you realize writing justifies you. So you start to publish. And I got some opportunity to work with some really cool people, which includes Usain Bolt and, of course, West Indies cricket. So, those were just some of the things that kind of kept me. And it's been an interesting ride so far.
Mm-hmm. And the experience of working with Cricket West Indies as communications and marketing manager, with Usain Bolt, as main PR person, and all the others you have been involved in, how that really has propelled you or taught you in terms of the whole business of sport.
All right, so the Caribbean, I've probably done a tour of the Caribbean on 3 occasions. So I played, so I did some sport, and then I traveled as a journalist. So that's 2. And then when I worked for government in Jamaica, I sat on some committees on the Caricom, which was more active at the time, and then West Indies cricket. So I've kind of been in the region on 4 separate occasions, and each time you learn. So I'd probably regard myself as a Caribbean resident, although I am from Jamaica. So and it is some of the same people I've interacted with because we're in the same age We're all 50 and over now. So yeah, I played against them. I didn't go to UWI. So I went to Micah College in Jamaica and then got a scholarship. But when you played, it's the same people. It's almost the same people. And most of us either kept in touch. Some of us have gone into different businesses, but at the same time, we would have interacted at some level. They're either coaches, managers. When you go to the Carifta games, for example, you end up seeing them or their parents. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, the Caribbean is pretty small, although we have to jump around so much to get to each other's country. But yeah, I think those of us who were born in the late 60s are all still in some business of sport at some level, whether as an administrator, journalist, marketer. So you kind of feel comfortable. But it's an interesting. Some people have grown, some people have not in terms of the country now, and some countries are doing better. Some are just getting by, but I think there is enough money in the pot out there for all of us to benefit from. And I hope this book kind of helps to guide people into developing. There's so much more that we could write, but of course, you never have time to put everything down. But I think if you think about packaging and competition, this publication will kind of give you a guide from A to Z.
Let me get some comments. Rudian Sylvan, good night. Okay, Rudian that's Toronto, Canada. And Haran Forto is saying, I totally agree. The problem is a lot of our administrators don't treat sports as a business. Marketing and communications vital to sports. Sports media needs more corporate support and funding. Also, there are so much ways to tell the stories that are untapped. From Photo, that's Haran Photo. Speaking about the book, I know it's available on Amazon. Well, I know Amazon because that's where I purchased my copy. And it's retail. If you want to give us some more information, apart from Amazon, where else the book is available?
Well, there is an ebook, and you can get a hard copy on Amazon. And in Jamaica, we haven't, because of COVID, we haven't figured out physically how to get them into the hands around the region. But we're thinking about that, and but the ebook version is also available, so you can download it. You have a choice. I think it's $9.99 for the ebook and $20 for the actual hard copy.
Yeah, it's right, $20 roughly for the hard copy. And tell us a little about your co-author, Dr. Esperance.
Okay, well, she's a sports psychologist. She would have worked with West Indies cricket women's team leading up to the World Cup in the World T20 competition. She's a lecturer at the University of the West Indies. She sits in that department. She lectures. She's also an author before. She has 2 books. And she's an expert analyst for, now is more important where people actually are opening up, because there was a stigma attached to psychology at one stage where people figured, oh, you were crazy if you were
Crazy.
yeah, if you were said you were consulting a psychologist. But everybody now, our people are saying that they actually have one. So Dr. Rose, she's a bit younger than I am, but she has done a lot of work in the region with regards, and particularly in Jamaica, and her connections with the University of the West Indies. She'd have studied in the UK, would have completed that PhD within the last 2 years. But you can catch her on several workshops, seminars. We're all zooming in and zooming out these days. She and I will share a platform next week, I think on the 28th, I think next week, Thursday, for a GC Foster College symposium that looks at sports in the post-COVID era. And we do a bit of that, and she does lectures online. So, she worked with some athletes, preparing them going to the Olympics, And as I said, there's not much of a stigma attached to working with a psychologist these days. There's still a little bit of secret about it, but more and more athletes are talking about it now.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I myself was a bit concerned about when my last daughter studied psychology at college, and it was at first I had that sort of phobia until I get to understand more about it. But certainly it is, and the we have to come back on some issues that I want you to talk daily about, because you have been an advocate of the whole business of sport, right? And but before we get to that, I want us to talk a bit about the business of sport conference. Obviously, because of COVID, we have just put the brakes or the hold on the business of sport for the time being. But why you thought it was necessary to conceptualize, come up with something with the business of sport conference?
Well, that was back in 2010.
Mhm.
Um, Jamaica did extremely well at the Beijing.
So yeah,
Yeah.
2008, yeah.
It
Mhm.
right. So Beijing, Berlin
And
was
Berlin
what
2009, yeah.
right was an extraordinary time for medal count for the region, of course, in particular Jamaica. And we thought that business matchmaking needed to have happened in a more meaningful way. And we were exploring some of the other areas of sport that people can get into. So yes, there is an existing relationship with coaches and athletes, or with masseuses, masseurs and athletes, agents and athletes. But there was just something that was missing, and we figured that if we had international people coming in and sharing their views, whether it's an attorney or a journalist or planners of events, that we could really get more people involved in the discussion. So we had people, out of the business of sport. We had people developing more websites for content, podcasts. We while we wouldn't take credit for any actual deals that were signed, there was a greater appreciation for the information or information that was required for those business opportunities, and that was it. So it was consistent, and we had it around the time there was a sporting event. It was always the first weekend in May when there was a massive track meet in Kingston, and that first weekend is May is when the athletes would essentially do the track and field athletes would actually start getting their first speed test, so it would almost be that time, because then the Diamond League, I mean, they've changed the names over the years. The Diamond League would have started probably just about that time. So in
Yeah.
terms of the circuit, so of 14 meets, that first weekend in May is almost the first one. I think Doha and Kingston. So you either went to Doha or came to Kingston. So we thought so we had an engaging audience, so we had people, so we figured that was the best time. But what it did, it really spoke to the business opportunities and the business matchmaking chances. So it's not just like getting a deal with a gear company or a shoe company, but who else can you have on your team? Who else is important? Do you have your accounts in order? Your attorneys? So we tried to build out, and we used some of our own as examples. We brought in people from the region, Mike Sands from the Bahamas, Keith Joseph from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we had people from Belize. So we kind of mixed and matched it, and we had ministers forum, so we spoke about policy. So it was really that kind of engagement. And over the years, it has really just kind of petered out, and we now have a consistent story, but now the economic model is the key, and I think policy needs to be upgraded, because a lot of people don't have sport policies in their respective countries.
But you see the need for the continuation of the business of sport conference. How would such an engagement be held post pandemic?
Well, I mean, yeah, we're still going to continue. We're going to do it online. But also we have to bear in mind that a lot of those things have been discussed. And this pandemic is extraordinary. I mean, nobody anticipated it would be going on 1 year and what? Um, from March 2020.
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years, yeah. So it is, we've had to draw breaks on that. But I figure with vaccination levels going up, I mean, I see people like St. Kitts leading the charge. Barbados is way ahead in terms of its numbers. I figure by next summer, and I'd probably use the Oregon meet, the World Championships in Oregon, as the marker. I mean,
Alright.
our West Indies team, cricket team, well, the women and men have been doing a bit of travel. I see the women heading to Pakistan soon, and the men are in UAE preparing for the World Championships. So cricket by itself, I mean, God knows I know they've been bubbled out. And despite, let me tell you, I work there, I'm also a fan, and we know we want them to do better. But let me tell you something, it has not been easy. Living in bubbles, moving from one place to the other. So, a bit of World Cup qualifications for football is going on. Netball has restarted. Trinidad and Tobago's team is here in Jamaica for a series, and Jamaica will be going to the UK in November. So there's a bit of movement. I figure by next summer, with the vaccination rates going up, that there'll be so much more. So we'll have a look at it January, because we'd have just about 5 months to think about it for the next edition in May.
Okay. When I mentioned that, indicated in a group chat that you will be on our program, one of the questions that came out, and well, they wanted me to ask you, had to do with your whole involvement in the sports media, and as one who is considered a trainer, communication specialist, etc. They were looking at what would you tell our advised young people who are interested in the sports media in particular, and especially females. We have in the Caribbean, we don't have that many women involved in sports media in particular. But in terms of the career options that are available when it comes to the media, and particularly the sports media.
All right. First of all, if you would have played the sport you want to cover, that is a plus. So that's one. That's the first thing. Two, network. So even a program like this, once you see it advertised, listen, use the networks around, because you really don't, unfortunately, you don't have much, you can't be moving around physically, because so many of the sporting games are closed. But go online, set up a blog, set up your own social media accounts, and talk about what you know, engage young people. And now, one of the quickest things you can do is develop content, because now is not necessarily just about reporting sports. So it's not that you're just giving the results, right? There's so many aspects to sport in terms of media. So you have commentary, analysis, writing, blogging, social media, management, production. One of the things, and so I'm traditional when it comes on to media. So I learned the basic way. So you come in as a producer, you go in the library to pick music, you produce a show before you even go on air. What I find now is that people are being pushed to go on air without the basics. And I find that our media houses are not doing what is required. But there's so much more opportunities. And with more access to platforms, it means you have to come to the table ready. So you almost have no honeymoon period. So you have to be good at something. Also, if you're good at photography, if you're a great, if you can use a camera, whether it's a still or a video camera, that is also very good, because what it means that you get the inside scoop. If you are, media now is open, so you can produce documentaries, you can write scripts for films, you can do shorts. I mean, 20 years ago or 30 years ago when I was joining, it was just about coming on air to read or doing commentary from a tournament. Now there is so much more you can do. And it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. But put in the work. Find somebody that you think that you would fit the description of somebody you'd like to be like, not necessarily copy them, but even their work ethic, and shadow them. So in other words, look at what they write, how they write, and kind of create your own path. And then start blogging, send a letter to the editor, and some of the basic things still work. Submit something, write a piece. Don't have to send it to a newspaper. You can publish it on your page and tag somebody. And so, you have more access now than we did. Certainly, Michael, back 30 years ago, we had to send letters to the editor. Some of we even had to post it. Now you can email it, or you can paste it on your page and tag the media house. And if it is good or it is relevant, they'll republish it. And you can almost publish something out of state. So now there are no borders to those kind of things, but it is important that you develop a solid base and try to develop expertise in one or two particular areas of media that you have interest in, and network as much as possible.
And also use social media for its good.
Yeah, man. Social media is the thing. Use it wisely. And if you're making a criticism, make it constructive and offer a solution. Don't just, say, the player is not good. But maybe if the player is a forward and maybe you think he's better at centre back, you can make a suggestion. I find now that we tend to use social media to just cuss. No. If you're involved, if you're interested in media, that is. For the fans, they can do anything they want. But if you're interested in becoming an analyst of sort, analyze the situation with a technical eye so the people actually know what you're talking about. And you could be surprised. You could get a call from somebody who probably think that you're good and could try. And have voiceovers, have tapes ready. So if you get called, you have a sample of what you want to do, whether it's a short film, a feature, or even your own voice. So have samples, collect those. And these smartphones nowadays you don't have to go into a studio. Find a room that's soundproof or good enough, or use headsets. I mean, trust me, the technology that's available through the phones now are totally innovative and can help young persons. We had to go to a studio, we had to book time and so on. Now you can sit in your car if you're in a quiet place enough, use your phones, record yourself, send it out, and you get something. Use the tools. You have SoundCloud, you have all kind of things. I mean, I could list them a whole lot of things that you could, store data for your own good.
And as Itania Wiggins is saying, social media technologies have flattened the barriers to entry into sports journalism, as you rightly said that. And no doubt use it wisely, because we have seen where whether coaches and broadcasters or whoever may have regretted, comments they would have made some 10, 15 years ago. So as you say, please be wise.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And those will come back to haunt you.
Yeah. Earlier, you mentioned the whole issue of Caricom, and it seems as if, you didn't give too much clarity on that, but it seems as if, in your mind, Caricom is more a stumbling block to the regional sports development. Is it that what you were actually coming at? Caricom is not really useful, playing a leading role, I should say. I'm trying to be diplomatic as possible in terms of regional sports development.
All right, so they've dropped the ball totally. And let's go back to the Treaty of Chaguaramas, which spoke about movement of specific professions in the business. So people like physical education teachers and coaches should be able to move around the region freely. That has gone through the gate. Some of it, even some of my own people have caused the problems on themselves. But that's a story. That's another story for another day. But in terms of what they have done from a policy standpoint, there has not been any further development. They had a cricket committee that no longer exists. They had a sporting office. They had people. They had a sporting head. I remember when I sat on that services committee myself, Richie Richardson, what's the name of that lady? Joseph, Peter Adrian, Ivor Gludon. It was a cross-reference team, and we did research, we collected data, and at Caricom office you had Hillary Brown. Oh boy, I don't remember the names right now, but you had a sports department. That department has been dismantled totally. So it no longer exists. And now, if there is a project of sorts, whether, I mean, first of all, they've gone totally bonkers with anything to do with the creative business at all. So not like that. While at West Indies cricket, of course, there was some what I'd call drama with some research on what cricket meant, and then we don't even know who commissioned the study. Then the next thing a study is out, and any given person in the business you spoke to, they could almost say they weren't even consulted. So I'm saying you have a region that is an outstanding region in sport generally, whether from the technical standpoint, we have had a number of people from this region administratively on global bodies. Our athletes are generally doing well. Why then don't we have a body that oversees the development of sport? We have institutions that teach. UWE after 40 years now have a faculty of sport. Why then doesn't the regional institution that governs trade, of which sport is part of trade and business, then identify sport as something that is important? What that says to me that they don't care. But you know what? Every time there's a study, whether from the IADB, Caribbean and Latin America, somehow sport and the creative business comes up as the best opportunities for income earning and wealth generation. And yet still, the outside of cricket, the one body that represents us all, doesn't even have a division or a human being that addresses those issues. So to say that they're a stumbling block is putting it mildly. But I've cost them enough, so I've decided to stop.
Let me get some, a comment here from Track Alerts TV. It's always nice to see Carole discussing sports. Great person and very knowledgeable about sports. One of few women who understand several sports. And let me say good evening to Anthony Foster. Yeah, Anthony Foster, who's behind
Hi,
Track Alerts
Anthony.
TV.
Yes,
Yeah.
I haven't seen much people in a very long time. I have to say also hello to and congratulations to Cheney Joseph, who just he was appointed a vice president for the
Yeah, Grenada Olympic Committee, first vice
Grenada
president.
Olympic Committee. Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So congrats. Yeah, and of course I have to say I have to wish the West Indies team well. I know we lost the 2 warm-up matches. I mean, it's one of the few things that connect us. And despite how I feel about them, because they tend to keep you on the edge of your seat, but then I support some other teams that does the same. So I guess why not support my own, right? But we wish them well. I think they play England.
Saturday, I think.
Is it Saturday? Maybe. Oh dear. Yes, Saturday. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Saturday. Yeah. Right. So, and while we on the whole issue of shout out and whatever, many people thought that in the absence of Usain Bolt, Jamaica would be there at international track and field. Were you really surprised with the ladies on show in Tokyo?
No man, the women have been consistent, you know. Think about it, since Carmelita Jetta, and possibly Alison Felix. The Caribbean women have dominated the sprints. Remember, Shauna is from the Bahamas, and we have had Veronica, Shelley, Elaine, uh, all that while. And whether we like to accept it or not, the men who have, some of the men who have dominated globally have Caribbean roots. But the truth is, if we should use West Indies cricket as a model, we always we lead, but we have to be consistent. And part of the consistency, which I spoke about, is the psychology of it, where the coaches who come in the business have to understand, is there a culture of sport in the region? So that's a whole other discussion. We talk about culture. Is it, you go to school, are you trained? Yes, there's talent, but talent is just about 50%. It's now a mind game. And so we are going to be left behind if we think that because we're big and strong and fast that we're going to get across the line. No. There's a science of it, there's a psychology of it, and there's motivation. There's intrinsic and extrinsic values. I mean, as I said, so we have a wide pool of talent, but we have to collate the people to put together to make that talent useful. And that is what we're lacking. So what you're gonna find, you're gonna find spurts of growth. Some countries are doing great in certain areas because they have consistently created those people. I mean, in track and field, our history. Grenada, since they've been having that track meet, it serves as a motivation. I mean, and so Grenada has been having presence on the track now because you now have a track meet for yourself. Bahamas has had one, Jamaica, Trinidad stopped, and look at the countries that have hosted in football, things like the CONCACAF tournaments and so on. So those countries are mobilized or have been mobilized to create their own pattern, but collectively, there has to be a model that we all follow. And that is what is not happening. And the movement of the people because some of us are manufacturing, GC Foster College of Physical Education and Sport have created the equivalent to that, I think is in St. George's. So where are those people going? When I look in Dubai, I see half of our PE teachers over there. Are they in schools in Canada? Or they're in colleges in the United States? Why are they not here and being encouraged to work in the region to create athletes? Mike Olivia went back to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They now have a new track as a result. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, it takes a little while because we're developing countries. And so our budgets don't extend, and obviously, but there can be some amount of inclination towards growth. And I think just like the music and the sport, we need to pay just a little more attention to that because those are the areas, the support to those people is monumental. Just think about that for a second.
Mm-hmm. There was a headline in the Jamaica Observer online today. I don't know if you came across it, but it was quoted by the president of the Jamaica Olympic Association, Mr. Christopher Samuda, in which he says athletes, and referring to Elaine Thompson, Chris Gayle, Omar McLeod must not harm Jamaica's good name. And in reference, he is referring to the outburst over the past year, well, during the year, I should say. And he I know Mr. Samuda is one who doesn't mix words, but the reference to Elaine Thompson, Chris Gayle, and Omar McLeod, as he says, the president of the Jamaica Olympic Association must have been sensing it himself that left to themselves, some of our top athletes could implode or hurt their own image, if not that of Jamaica's. Carl, as one who has been following these athletes themselves, whether they are cricketers, whether they are track and field athletes, how important you think it is, and in the context of all that you have been saying, including the ABCs of Caribbean sport, how important are these athletes to maintain some cool heads at times?
Well, all right. I don't think Jamaica's brand will be as affected because I think because as fans we know we are far more discerning as fans, so we can separate. Uh, I don't want to comment specifically about any particular athlete. I actually know the three athletes fairly well. Um, less so Elaine. I've actually worked with Chris and Omar to some extent. But I don't think Jamaica's brand will be affected as such. What happens in this case is that people make the separation and they're damaging their own brand. Personally, that's my view. And as somebody who assesses the marketability or lack thereof of those athletes, Chris is almost on his exit from international play, and both Elaine and Omar are still have probably one more Olympics and certainly 2 or 3 more World Championships left, barring any unforeseen injuries. But they have brands that they are associated with, and they have relationships that they have to maintain. As it turns out, this may be very controversial what I'm about to say. Because of the amount of money that's circulated in cricket, Chris can still earn far more than the 2 track and field athletes. If there's any up and down with the brand, track and field doesn't generate that kind of funds. And if you're not running well consistently and you're not doing meet records, your incentive package is not as good. And I've also said it that the countries that have strong cricket and football programs have a better investment for sport than the countries who are only doing better in track and field, because track and field don't attract that high level of investment. Because broadcast rights, when somebody will pay $1 billion for World Cup football, you probably need 5 or 6 track meets to even garner that kind of money. Think about that, because football is still the number 1 sport. Cricket is way there because of India, Pakistan, and so cricket is now going into the US. So there's still a little bit of unbalance, but I don't think the country brand is going to be damaged. People are making a separation, and so individual athletes will have to find their own teams that can help to guide them into making better decisions. Decision making is important for them at this stage.
Mm-hmm. And as we get ready to wrap up, Carole, the importance of people like you and others, the experts, the professionals, being around, some of our professionals, especially our Caribbean professionals, the importance, and I want you to talk a bit about it. It's very important because, as you indicated, they, some of them, I'm certain, may not want to be or fall into similar category. I know you don't want to, and I could understand, call certain names, but I would say someone like Sha'Carri Richardson, for example, on social media, these sort of things. But in seriousness, the importance of having experts and professionals to guide their career, and especially at an early age, at an early stage, I should say, rather, of their professional career.
Well, the truth is, when you're all right, your first line of contact is with your coach and then a manager, and the manager should have the presence of mind to build out the team. I was on a team where the manager and the agent was already in place along with the coach, and then I was added as the publicist / marketing person, and I was a liaison between the sponsors for the most part. Things like your attorney, of course, for contracts. But then there's an important relationship because so much of what you do is now in the public eye, and that is important. So it's about messaging, it's about how you relate, and so on. So, back in the day, it was the gear or the shoe. No, you're a public figure. You're influencing people, and so your message has to be on par. So it is important that you assemble a team. And I don't think brands that you're associated with are they're interested in building out your team. And so you have to be strategic, and you budget for those activities. So over a period, you will always have a team to support. And somebody would always be representing you at the best at all times. So that's important. So the standard people, and it's funny because I did a blog on it some months ago. So the athlete, have a manager, a personal assistant, agent, publicist, an attorney, and of course an accountant. So the average elite athlete, including the athlete themselves, is you're looking at a minimum of 7 people.
That's a contingent.
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
There's money out there to be made. So and there are percentages. The agent is race or competition, and so there's a standard market fee. And the rest you can make the arrangement. You can put some on staff, put some on percentages, and it can work out because you're generating fees. And so when you make that kind of contact and arrangement, it will work out, but it has to be sustainable. You can't walk into a boardroom by yourself. No company will speak to you without an attorney or at least a manager. And then they're going to ask you, so how many hits you have on social media? Well, they would have looked. That's true, Yatanya. They would have looked at your social media anyway and know how many followers you have. And that and those things are now more important than almost as important as how many races you win. Think about that. So, you have to make the balance. So I think a minimum 5 to 7 should really be the to what is expected, and you grow. So you start with 4 and grow. Or you can use a firm. The thing about a firm is that a firm treats you as a client, and they don't have the personal touch to deal with, because when they say, we want you to show up for an appearance here, they don't have time to say to you. They just send you the instructions. If you had somebody in that team who can manage that, so so there are just some nuances that you have to protect if you're going to develop your brand.
Okay, then I want to thank you very much for being part of our program. Again, the book, if you can just let us see a copy of the book, ABCs of Caribbean Sport, Marketing and Psychology. There is also an e-edition, an ebook available, and you can also check online as well your favorite stores. Well, I can talk about Amazon because
they're both on Amazon. The ebook is for $9.99, and the book itself is $20.
$20, right? Yeah. So, folks, I suggest you pick up a copy of the book. That is Dr. Olivia Rowe's Esperance and Carole Beckford. They're the co-authors of this book. Very important indeed. Thank you once again, Carole. I want to appreciate you being on the program, and all the best. Hope we can talk sometime in the future again. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Great talking to you.
Okay, then. Thank you very much, folks. That's Carole Beckford in Kingston, Jamaica, and I'm in Austin, Texas. Yeah. Thank you once again for that bit there. And there was one comment that came in. Harold didn't really got it in time, but what is your take on mentorship in sports media regionally and creating a platform to pass on knowledge and experience to others? Is there such a platform? Something we can discuss in the future. Certainly, I should get someone on the program that we can deal specifically on the sports media once again. Thank you very much once again, everyone. Our program continues on Saturday. Hopefully, I'm saying hopefully, we should be talking a little more about the Breland Taplin issue. We're hoping to talk a little on the Breland Taplin issue on Saturday from 1 o'clock. Always a pleasure being with you, and thanks very much for being on the program this evening, and hope to see you on Saturday for 1 o'clock Eastern Time. I'm Michael Bascom, wishing you all the best.